Shalom and welcome back. As we spoke about last time, we're in the midst of the laws of the chosen house written by the RAMBAM, codified the Jewish laws all about the Beis HaMikdash. And as we spoke about before, the RAMBAM brings down as a positive commandment to build the Beis HaMikdash. As we recall, we discussed that being the aspect that it is a positive commandment, and it means that it is upon us to complete. Otherwise, it would not be a command. If it is a command, that means that it is in our hands to fulfill that particular mitzvah. The Rambam wrote over here, Mitzvah selivnot bayit Hashem. It is a positive commandment to build a house for God in order to bring korbanot, for us to do the sacrificial service, which of course was done by the Kohanim, the priests, in the Beis HaMikdash, and for the Jewish people to go up there 3 times a year. The Jewish people had the obligation to go up to the Beis HaMikdash 3 times a year on the major holidays, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. And when they came, they had to bring sacrifices. The second law the Rambam brings down over here, and here he gives a little historical background about the buildings of the Beis HaMikdash and the time frame. When the Jews entered into the land of Eretz Yisrael, now remember that the obligation was to build the tabernacle, which was done for the 40 years that the Jewish people were wandering in the desert. Upon entering in the land of Eretz Yisrael, they immediately set up shop of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, in Gilgal for 14 years. Now, Gilgal was the site of the campment of the Jewish people for those 14 years, during the time that the Jewish people conquered the land of Eretz Yisrael from the 7 nations who lived here, and divided the lands amongst the tribes. So that took 7 years for conquest, and 7 years for division, 14 years during that period of time. The tabernacle was up in Gilgal, the main encampment, and sacrifices were brought. Now it's important to stress this point over here, that there wasn't one day without bringing sacrifices and doing the work. As we know, out of the 613 commandments, more than half of them dwell either directly or indirectly with the aspect of the Beis HaMikdash and the work that went on over there. So this is a very, very important matter. This is something that's sorely missing today. And in fact, we don't even know what's so depressing about it, that we don't even realize how much we are missing from the aspect of the work of the Beis HaMikdash. People talk about, you're going backwards, it's from the ancients, from the caveman period, who brings sacrifices today. But only if people knew, only if they knew, as written in the book of Haggai, how much substance and bounty would be in the world, and how many blessings would be in the world if we would rebuild, and when we rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, all of this will return to the Jewish people and to the entire world. Very, very important to remember how much we are missing. So for those first 14 years, it was stationed in Gilgal. Misham Ba'u Shiloh. From there, they moved it to Shiloh, which is in the area of Yosef. Ubanu Sham Bayit. So here it was a sort of a half combination of the tabernacle, which they were used to, and they also had the base, though, which was now made out of stone. And for there it stood for 369 years. Quite a long period of time, if you think about it. 369 years, that's quite a span. So from there was the center, and people would come up 3 times a year to Shiloh, and they would bring their sacrifices, and the Kohanim would do their work over there. After Shiloh was destroyed by the Palestinians in the time of Eli HaKohen, in the destruction, the tabernacle continued to wander from place to place, until finally in the time of King David himself, who unfortunately was not able to build the Beis HaMikdash, as the prophet told him, not for you to build the Beis HaMikdash, but for your son Shlomo to build the Beis HaMikdash. Finally, in Shlomo's time, the building of the Beis HaMikdash was done, and it was brought to Yerushalayim. From that period of time, it could not be moved anymore from any place at all. Now, the first temple stood for 410 years, until finally it was destroyed by the Babylonians, King Nebuchadnezzar. And the Jewish people were sent to exile for 70 years. Upon their return, in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, one of the first acts that they did was to go up to the Temple Mount, clean up the ruins that were there for the last 70 years, and to start the work of the Beis HaMikdash. Interestingly enough, we do not need a building proper in order to start the work of the Beis HaMikdash. It is enough just to rebuild the altar to bring some of the utensils which are needed for the work and to get going. In fact, that's what we find during that period of time. That for the first 23 years in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, the building proper was at a standstill. It wasn't built. But sacrifices went on. As long as you have the exact location on the Temple Mount, you could do work, and that's your obligation. It's not that you could do work. You want to do, you don't want to. No. As we recall, this is a commandment. Many of the mitzvot are connected to the Beis HaMikdash. The Jews didn't want to leave out for one day because they know that the divine protection is upon the Jewish people when the Beis HaMikdash is built. The Rambam goes on to tell us, Binyan Sheba na Shlomo Kafam Rosh B'Melachim. It's already listed in the book of Kings. If you look at the book of Kings 1, chapter 8, it talks about the building that Shlomo built of the Beis HaMikdash. V'kein binyan atid levnot afal pi shehu katuv b'Yechezkel eininu mefurash u'mevuar. Now here's an interesting point over here. The third temple is explained to us in detail in the last chapters of Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel. That's unbelievable. So everything is there. But, when the Jewish people returned in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, what did they do? They knew the temple of Shlomo. They had the blueprints because it's written down in the book of Kings. And they knew Yechezkel's prophecy of the future temple. And they wanted to obviously build it like that, but they didn't understand it all. To this day, we still don't understand all of the details which are listed there. So did they give up? You might think, sure. Well, forget about it. Just forget about it. I don't understand. Here's the details. Here's the blueprints. If God wants us to do it, let him give us understanding about how to make it. That's a great excuse. We don't understand. But that's not what they did. They didn't just sit on their ass and not do anything and says, oh, we have an excuse, we can't make it, etc. No, not at all. Not those people. Time of Ezra and Nehemiah. They took what they understood from the prophecy of Ezekiel. They took what they remembered from Bayit Rishon, and they made a combination, a combo, sort of like a sandwich. You know, you take pastrami and you take corned beef and you put them together, you have a combo. That's the same thing that they did over here. They took what they understood from the prophecies of Yechezkel. They took what they remembered from Bayit Rishon, and they made a combination, and that became the second temple, and that lasted for 420 years. Quite a long period of time. So we don't just sit around and say, well, I don't understand. What should I do? No, not like that at all. You do what you can do. In fact, if you look at the second temple period, a very important point over here, which I want to bring out, it tells us that when the second temple was officially opened, there were elders there who had lived through the exile. They must have been in their 80s, 90s. They remembered the Bayit Rishon, they remembered the first temple, and now they looked at this temple and they started to cry. Why were they crying? Because they said, you know, the first temple was glorified, it was beautiful, it was made by Shlomo, it lasted so long. And here, you know, look at this small temple that you guys made. It's just like, you know, boards here, boards there, you know. It's nothing special, so it hit them. And, you know, how could this be the Beis HaMikdash? Where's the honor? It wasn't something very glorified. But the point is that you do what you can. You take what you can. You take the materials that you have with you at that particular point, and you build, and that's what it is. Afterwards, you become wealthier. You tax the people. There's more money in the vault. Yeah, you beautify the temple. You add special things, etc. You make it into gold. The Rambam brings that down over here in Halakha. But at first, you know, you build it as is, whatever, and then afterwards you have more money. You build it out of you coat it with silver. You coat it with gold. Exactly the way it should be. So too we find in the Hashmonaim, the Maccabees, when they first re-entered the temple was destroyed in ruins. There were idol worship. There were idols all over the place. Well, first they had to clean house and take everything out. Then they also, you know, they were just after revolt and stuff. Obviously didn't have money, but whatever you put together, the main thing is that you're doing God's will. You're doing what God wants. So it doesn't matter how the house is. If it's boards or if it's silver, if it's gold, it doesn't make a difference. You're fulfilling the commandment with the best that you could do at that time. Things get better, you make it better. That's what he writes over here. So the people of the second temple, yeah, they cried, but the temple stood and they fulfilled the mitzvah. How far are we removed from that today? If you looked at if we could summarize and see over here exactly what we have, we see that from the first day that they entered in the time of Yoshua ben Nun, they had a working tabernacle or temple later on. They were fulfilling the mitzvot. Oy vavoy to us. We're back. But this is missing from us. We still don't have a tabernacle and we still don't have a temple. And don't think it has to be on a grand scale. Whatever we do would be good in God's eyes, because you just have to fulfill that commandment as much as possible. And it's in our hands. It's in our hands. We have the capability. That's the double tragedy of Tisha B'Av today. Yes. It's not like when we were in the exile times, so all we could do is sit around and mourn. No. Today we have in our opportunity to get up and to rebuild and to bring an altar, to bring the vessels. They're all prepared. They're all ready. The Kohanim know their work. It's all in front of us. The only people stopping it is us ourselves. That's the tragedy. And it is time to change that. It is time to throw off the yoke of the nations, of the Obamas, of the Europeans, and to go up to the Temple Mount again and to do what God wants without fear of the nations. I'm Levi Chazan. Until next time.